What's happening, folks? Back with another reaction, back with some more non-album Smiths, though we are getting close to the end of this journey. And I did want to mention, I'm jumping over, I guess, a studio-recorded version of Is It Really So Strange? Because I think a couple reactions ago, in the previous non-album folder, thank you again to daisylusion, there was a recording of Is It Really So Strange, I think from like the John Peel sessions or something like that. So yeah, given that I reacted to this, or that song, only a couple reactions ago, and guessing that it's not terribly different from the version I already heard, I'm jumping over it. But once we get to the end of this final folder of non-album tunes, because again, this is the folder for non-album tracks from the era of Strange Ways, Here We Come, I'll circle back and I'll react to that one, I suppose, as the final Smiths reaction, or at least the final Smiths audio reaction, which is further to say, I look forward to doing some Smiths video reactions, and perhaps I'll kick that journey off over on my Patreon in the not-too-distant future. In any case, the tune we're actually going to listen to, is it Sweet and Tender Hooligan? Do I have this right? Yes, Sweet and Tender Hooligan. So there's a bit of comedy or apparent contradiction in the phrase. A hooligan is usually defined by behavior, someone who is belligerent, violent, unpleasant, someone who goes looking for trouble, and often the violent kind. And of course, you know, in the context of the UK, hooligan, I think very specifically, especially like in the 80s and early 90s, it related to, you know, football hooligans, bands of roving young men, you know, looking to, number one, fight supporters of other clubs, but I think often also just, you know, causing ruckus and havoc, especially like at away matches, especially even, maybe even more so, away matches on continental European soil and so on. Nevertheless, the point is, I guess you could interpret it literally, like someone who is in that world, someone who does go out on, you know, the weekends and stays out late, you know, throwing bottles or fighting people and so on, but actually has a sweet and tender side, or, you know, maybe is a person who kind of has behavior across the spectrum or gamut, and maybe it's just like an ironic or sarcastic title, like, oh, what a sweet and tender hooligan you are, doing these violent things and behaving in that way. So yeah, I feel like with Morrissey's songwriting, it could go either way. Maybe it has nothing to do with any of that. Let's see what I can pick up on a first listen. This is the Smiths. The tune is Sweet and Tender Hooligan, and it's a non-album track from the era of Strange Ways, Here We Come.
Course you won't, not until the next time.
Right.
He was a sweet and tender hooligan, and he swore that he'll never do it again. And of course he won't, not until the next time. Poor old man, he had an accident with a 3-bar fire, but that's okay, because he wasn't very happy anyway. A poor old man, in her very own medicine bed, but that's okay. She was old and she would have died anyway. Don't blame her, sweet and tender hooligan, because he'll never do it again. Not until the next time. Till you've heard every word before you decide, would you look into those motherly eyes? I love you for you, my love, you, my love, you, my love, you, I love. Till you've heard every word, but before you decide, would you look into those motherly eyes? I love you for you, my love, love you just for you, my love. Don't blame the sweet and tender hooligan, because they'll never do it again. And in the midst of life we are in death, etc. Because they'll never do it again. And in the midst of life we are in death, etc. 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 etc.
on a lot. I mean, sonically, it had a lot of energy. It had a bit of darkness to it. It kind of reminded me of some throwback rock and roll, and maybe even a little bit of like darker ska. There was something about like the rhythm guitar there that had a bit of a energetic ska sound. I mean, it wasn't like skanking ska. It didn't have brass in it, but yeah, there was a bit of a old rock and roll meets a bit of ska sound to it, mixed I suppose just with the Smiths' innate or characteristic indie rock sort of sound. And yeah, lyrically, I'm not sure, but I feel like maybe it is about someone who is belligerent. Maybe not in an overt like football context, though maybe that's part of it, but seemingly vis-a-vis another person, a woman, I think. And then like because it was like, oh, she was probably going to die soon anyway. So it's like, oh, like did someone really die because of his behavior? And it is about being violent in public and so on, but there were other lines where I was like, is it more about someone who's mistreating a woman, and maybe it's like his mother or something like that, maybe it's not a significant other, but yeah, it sounded like someone who it sounded sarcastic, the sweet and tender hooligan who apparently keeps forswearing any further belligerent behavior and is never going to do it again until the next time, which inevitably any sentiment like that makes me think of Never Before Is What You Swore the Time Before from Depeche Mode. But it feels like it's that kind of vibe that he keeps saying, I'm done with that, that's in the past, I don't do that anymore until the next time. And then he swears it off again until the next time, and the cycle goes on and on. And again, it feels like hooligan is more literally, directly, and purposefully applied, and sweet and tender is like, again, maybe he's the son, so it's like, oh, it's her sweet and tender boy, but she just can't accept, or he won't admit to her that he's a hooligan and does these bad things and can't get out of this behavior loop or pattern. So yeah, and again, maybe it's not the mother, maybe it's a broader point that's being made, but that's what I took away from it on a first listen. So obviously I look forward to any insights, but I really liked it sonically, and it's a tune that I think, as I said, it it had energy and it had some drive to it, but there was a bit of a darkness too, which, if I'm even remotely right about the lyrics and the themes, it feels like that is well placed musically. In any case, let me know what you think. Thank you again to Daisylusion, and I will see you for the next one. Peace.